Vanson Bourne conducted this research into the prevalence of shadow IT in July and August of 2014. We interviewed 100 IT decision makers and 100 business decision makers in both the UK and the US, and focusing solely on enterprises, meaning organisations with more than 1,000 employees. The purpose of interviewing both categories was to see what differences there might be in understanding and perception of the shadow IT phenomenon. The definition of shadow IT we used was core IT products or services that are being commissioned and sourced by departments other than the IT department. It is clear from our research that shadow IT is not in its infancy, and it's growing. More than 3/4 of IT decision makers are clear that business departments are engaging in shadow IT. And of the minority that don't see shadow IT already, around 40% foresee its arrival in their business before very long. Looking at business decision makers' perceptions of how widespread shadow IT is, 56% have shadow IT in their department now, and over half of them say it's prevalent in most business departments in their company. And of those business decision makers not currently using shadow IT in their department, 1/3 say it's going on in other departments. This means that, thinking about the survey at organisational level, around 70% of those we surveyed have shadow IT in business departments somewhere, according to our business decision maker sample. The survey established areas of agreement between the two respondent types. For example, in terms of which technologies are most prone to shadow IT. But there is a divergence of opinion when it comes to how widespread it is across the business. Not many more than 1/3 of IT decision makers see this as affecting the majority of business departments. Yet more than half of our business decision makers sample say the same thing. This could suggest that more IT acquisition is going on in the shadows than the IT department recognises. Looking at how long this has been going on, there is agreement across the two sample types that the phenomenon is older than 6 months. But the interesting finding is that more than half as many more business decision makers say shadow IT has been a factor for more than 2 years. This really does reinforce the suggestion that it's a practice that has only recently begun to emerge from the shadows, where the IT department was to a large degree ignorant of its existence. If the business departments are the ones driving shadow IT, which seems logical, then our research suggests that it's going to grow faster than the IT department expects. Looking at the outcomes that support this view, whilst around 1/2 of IT decision makers we surveyed think that business departments already engaged in shadow IT will do more of it in the next year or two, or that it will extend into other business departments for the first time, nearly 3/4 of business decision makers have that same view. Equally, 80% of business decision makers in companies where there is no shadow IT foresee its arrival in the next 2 years. And that's double the number of IT decision makers in those companies saying the same thing. So if we are to believe the previous view, that business decision makers have known about IT's existence for longer than IT, then maybe they also have a more realistic view of its speed of travel and its applicability across new departments. The apparently strong foothold that shadow IT has already achieved and looks likely to extend in the near future will have a number of causes. We'll look at those later. But given that it is something of a revolution in how IT is procured, we wanted to establish where the momentum is coming from. And here we see that yet again there is a difference of opinion between IT and business decision makers. Nearly twice as many business decision makers say the momentum is coming from department heads or senior managers. We might have imagined that this revolution is taking place in just a couple of business departments. Sales and marketing are often held up as mavericks that could easily do their own thing, perhaps to the detriment of the whole. Although IT and business departments don't exactly agree on the 5 leading users of shadow IT, It's of note that marketing appears on only one of those lists, and they're not at the top. Departments with quite different characteristics are doing this, and as we'll see next, the motivations are uniform. When we look at the reasons why shadow IT is happening, the answers unavoidably suggest that business departments are frustrated by the service they get from the IT function. It's quicker for a business department to do it themselves, they understand their needs better, and overall it's simply easier. And it's telling that the IT decision makers admit this in even greater numbers than the business decision makers do. So, business departments of many different types are being led by senior managers or department heads to shortcut, delay, misunderstanding, and general grief by jumping on the shadow IT bandwagon. But there is a downside in that the great majority of IT decision makers regard it as a security threat, and nearly half of them rank it as very high on the risk spectrum. Compounding this is that only a third of business decision makers agree on the security issue, with a similar number saying that their business should apply restrictions to shadow IT. Rather, business decision makers are far more likely to see business departments taking more ownership of IT acquisition as being something beneficial to the IT department, because they regard it as freeing up IT time for other tasks, while at the same time making their own department more productive and efficient. If you'd like to know more on this or to talk to us about how we can help you develop insights into your markets, please do get in touch. Our contact details are on the website.